Does it tell me if we're live? It says you're live, so I think it's supposed to be working. Hello everyone. We're going to assume that everything is going right for once when we try to do these things. So we're Mitch Brown and David St. Louis. We work for Elite Prospects. You probably know the channel. We just released our draft guide, our last prospects ranking for the 2024 NHL draft class, and we're here to answer all your questions about the draft and promote our draft guide and tell you as much as we can about the prospects you want to know about. So I'm going to start. Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to chime in and say this has been a blazing start by David being surprised that it worked right away.
I think the first time we tried to do this, it took an hour for it to work. So it's already better in a certain way. So I like this. We already had some questions sitting in the chat. Matt says, a certain Ducks podcaster likes Yakemchuk for the Ducks at number 3. Talk him off the ledge, please. So yeah, we saw that. Mitch, you want to talk about Yakemchuk?
Yes, absolutely. So Carter Yakemchuk is kind of an interesting project because I think when you look at prospects that you're generally picking in the top 5, the top 10, you're looking for someone a little bit more refined. But in terms of pure tools, you can see why this certain Ducks podcaster is very excited by his potential. He's big, he's physical, he has a cannon of a shot, he can dangle off the point and create offense. There's a lot of reason to be excited about his potential. And when you look at that, anyway, I think where there's a difference between the people who are really high on him and the people who are a bit lower on him like us is probably just more of a projection standpoint. I think he is a bit of an older player. He's a bit of a bigger player. And so the development curve might not be quite as favorable to him. Now, the other side of the equation is that he's improved at a significant rate with the WHL. You look at him last season when he was already a good top pairing guy. He's a completely different player in the sense of how much more impactful he is, how much better he's become over time. I think realistically, 3 is very rich for me, especially given the options that are available. I think there's a real chance that he's kind of just a number 4, number 5 who plays power play 2. But there's also the boom potential that's right up there with the very best in the draft class. So certain unnamed Ducks podcaster is right to be excited by his potential, but me personally, if I'm looking to pick for the Ducks, I'd be more interested in Cayden Lindstrom at number 3.
Yeah, I think it's a bit of a reach for us in general, but we do see upside. I think it's entirely possible that he goes number 3. So I think it's fine to be high on him. It's just you have to be concerned about the weaknesses and the development that's going to have to occur for him to really reach his potential. So we're probably going to have a bit of an issue with Zoom call. We're going to figure this out because I didn't know it was just 30 minutes limit. So we're going to do this out while we answer questions. The second one is thoughts on Max Swanson and where he ends up going in the draft. I think it's for you, Mitch, again.
Yeah, he's so exciting, isn't he? Like the playmaking, the skill off the backhand in particular, how he can hit like pucks through the tiniest of little seams that you've ever seen. Like it's unbelievable some of the things that he does, and he's able to like deceive and open players up a little bit to create those opportunities. You add in the very smart off puck offense, how he kind of reloads behind the play, pops into space for quick wristers and so on. I think he's a pretty complete, well-rounded player, but the big question is he's a below average skater at 5'7". So how do you project that into the NHL? For me personally, I think he's probably a mid to late round guy. Like in terms of pure upside, in terms of pure passing ability, he's a top 10 guy in the draft class. But the margins for him are so slim that I think there's a real chance that he ends up being more of a wait and see guy for basically every NHL team. If he goes undrafted, I wouldn't be surprised, although I think his playoffs probably helped push him into that 5 to 7 round range.
The next question is, any differing opinions between you two around the D-man that will go at the top of the class? Is there any one that we just disagree on?
I don't know if we disagree on the evaluation like of anyone. I think it's more in terms of how we would rank them. I think Levshunov has kind of been a sticking point for us this year, with you tending to favor Parekh and Buium more, and I'm still Levshunov or Parekh as the number 1 defenseman from this class.
Yeah, it's all very close together. Even I'm going to release my own ranking, and I think Levshunov is not going to be my number one defenseman, and that's maybe the only difference we really have. I just see more of the risk with his projection, I think, than maybe you do. I think you see more of the potential, and the thing is, Parekh and Buium, I think, have a bit higher ceiling even than Levshunov if we take into account the hockey sense component. And it's really all about this. I think I usually favor a lot tools when I look at defensemen in general, but in terms of Parekh and Buium, they have such a high hockey sense and they have such an ability to control the game on the offense that I think they deserve to be ahead. Levshunov showed these things more in flashes during the season, but he didn't have the same consistency of creation ability. And I think that might be what separates them a bit for me, but it's all very close together. So we'll see what I end up doing. I'm not sure. My board is always going to be Elite Prospects board, and we always have collective opinions on these players, but we have some slight differences. And in these cases, it's even slighter than usual, I could say.
My counterpoint to this would be that I think if you were to put Parekh or Buium on Michigan State this year, they probably have a very similar season to the one Levshunov had, because it's just chaos the way that they play. It's a lot of throwing pucks blindly up the boards, throwing them into battles, and hoping that the forwards can come out with it on the other end. Whereas with Denver and Saginaw, you're looking at two teams that are very, very focused on pumping shot quality, very focused on getting pucks to the middle on the breakouts. Like Denver's breakout is make that clever pass to the middle, usually off the backhand, sometimes through your own legs for a clean breakout. And Levshunov can do those things. He's also a little bit on the raw side in terms of the way he sees the game, as David pointed out. But to me, that's all just potential. He's someone who, he went 18 months ago, he was playing hockey in Belarus, and now he's a top pair number one defenseman in college hockey. Like, that's a pretty much unprecedented development curve.
The next question is... it comes from Mitch Brown's bowl of oatmeal. So I think someone remembers that you really like oatmeal.
That's amazing.
I recently became more aware of Marek Vanacker, and I think there's immense potential. Could he be a surprise early pick like Easton Cowan, or am I getting carried away with recency bias? I'm going to leave this question with you again because I'm trying to fix Zoom in the meantime.
Yeah, he could. I don't know if he'll be as a surprise as Easton Cowan if he goes in the first. I think the first is probably where I'd likely anticipate him going, somewhere in the 20 to 32 range. Maybe he's one of the first 3 picks on day 2, but he's a really, really fascinating prospect because it's that you don't necessarily see it all the time, but you see so much in these individual moments, right? You see the speed to be able to take a puck in motion, beat the D around the corner, and then attack the net. You see him constantly trying to pull pucks off the wall in the cycle to get to the middle. You see down low playmaking, one-touch backhand feeds through layers to teammates and up the middle. And then the defense too. It's not always there, but he does have a knack for diving back down into the zone and ripping pucks off sticks and creating offense the other way. So I think realistically, probably a very solid late first round candidate with the potential to pop off next season, become one of the highest scoring players in the OHL, and probably put himself in the top prospect status. Do I think he'll do it in the same way that Cowan did, which is a lot of based on like motor, physicality, creating space with his body, inflicting pain upon other players, and then creating offense from that? Probably not. He'll do it in more of a finesse skill way, but yeah, he could certainly have a massive season next year and be one of those guys who we're looking at as a top prospect within 12, honestly, probably within like 6 to 7 months.
Yeah, agreed with everything. And now Zoom works, so the questions will have my full attention. Catton is the 3rd best forward in the draft for me. The question is from Zachary. Is size the only reason he's falling, or do you guys have a lot of concerns with his game? I can take this one. It's not that we have a lot of concerns about his game. It's just that as we learn through the years to project prospects, we've added some importance on wall play and being able to create from those walls. And I think Catton has a lot of playmaking ability off the rush. He can manipulate defenders, go east-west, create gaps in coverage, and make these really insane drop passes. He has a high end vision, but his ability to make plays from the walls is not as developed as, say, Iginla, for example. And that kind of reduces his impactability in terms of playmaking at the NHL level because there's some facet of the game that he won't be able to create as much. So off the rush at NHL level against weaker team, you can create a lot, and in the offensive zone, the power play too. But on the walls of the offensive zone against better teams, it's where the top players really make their mark, and they say that 80% of the game at the NHL level is played along the walls, and if you can't really get out of traffic and play that physical game, protect the puck and make plays to the inside, you won't be as effective as other players. So I think he has a lot of talents. It's just that we see other players as having more physical potential, and like Bekatseneki and TJ Genla, and those players are just pushed ahead because of that. So we really like his hockey sense, his stick handling skills, his skating. It's just that there's some aspects of the game that he still needs to work on. And at his frame and with his ability to add, we're not sure that he's going to have the same ability to add weight as some other prospects. He's going to have a harder time really impacting that game, even if we project in terms of development. What do you think, Mitch?
Yeah, I also want to add that having him as the number 3 forward from this draft is like a pretty reasonable take, I'd argue. Like, I think basically from 3, I mean, I'd probably have Lindstrom pretty like cemented as the number 3 forward, but from like 4 to 8, 9 even on the list of best forwards in the draft, the difference is so slim between them. A lot of it comes down to preference. And I think with Berkly Catton, again, it's not necessarily about the size, because we do see lots of players in that size range who are very good, if not dominant along the boards. Like, look at someone like Seth Jarvis, who is 5'10", 5'11", and his entire game is largely creating space all along the wall, getting to the middle for rebounds, chances, quick passes into the slot, and so on. So I think with Catton, where we ended up is probably more of splitting the difference between the potential and the chance that he doesn't quite have enough to like secure a top 6 playoff team role. But on the other hand, it's like you just kind of have to bet that a guy who's so dynamic in transition has so much different skills available to him, and also does show an ability to get inside off the rush in particular. We'll figure it out at some point.
Snuffa Lupagus ask each of your favorite sleeper picks for the 2024 NHL draft. You can start, Mitch.
Yeah, Blake Montgomery. I think that's a pretty easy one. 6'3", 6'4" forward with above average speed. Takes the middle with a ton of speed as well. Very dynamic handler. He has a lot of the same dynamic rushing qualities that you look at with top prospects in the draft. The difference is that maybe the playmaking isn't as natural to him, even though he does have lots of passing skill, and he's not much of a cycle creator. He needs to start taking pucks in motion along the boards to be able to break free from contact and pressure. But I think in terms of pure upside, he's probably one of the best bets that you're going to have on day 2 of the draft. I wouldn't be surprised at all if he goes around pick 50 to 60.
I really like QMJHL defenseman Alexis Bernier, who had a great impact on a really good team in the Q this season. He's all about the details of the game, so he's really good at shutting down opposing forwards in the defensive zone. He reads passing lanes very well. He positions well. It's just that his skating is not as good as it could be, so that's why we have him a bit down on our board. But he's a 6'1", 6'2" right shot D. He has the physicality and a lot of flashes of puck moving ability. And in the offensive zone, when he has the opportunity to make plays, he can make those plays. He can find players in the slot. He's able to manipulate a bit. So I think there's more to his game to be developed, and he has that strong defensive foundation. So I think like in the 3rd round, 4th round, 5th round, he's a pretty good prospect to target. Next question, again, it's from Zachary. What do you think are the best re-entry players, and why is it Anthony Romani? Another question for you.
I think so. For me, the top guy probably is Jesse Pulkkinen. That's more of David's wheelhouse, though. But then number 2, I think it's probably Blake Montgomery. I actually really like Romani a lot. The difficulty with projecting him is like, where exactly does he fit into an NHL lineup, right? He's a skilled shooter, probably not your top of the circle one-time scorer on the power play. He's a skilled playmaker, but he's not really a dynamic player. Is he a strong defensive player? Yes, but will he kill penalties and win all his battles? Not sure. but he does have a lot of great individual components, which is why we ranked him somewhere in the 80 to 90 range, I think. There's a lot of reason to be really excited about him. And this is a really strong class for overagers, particularly in the mid rounds, again, with guys like Noah Powell as well. So it's a really interesting draft, especially with the USHL getting better. You keep having more of these guys who go from prep and then step up as the competition steps up and put themselves in draft conversation.
Yeah, and I have to talk about Zeev Pulkkinen. He's awesome, really. He's really, really fun to watch. And the only issue, again, it's a bit like the previous player I talked about. It's really his skating. It projects as below average on the NHL level, and he plays in a league where the pace isn't as high. But everything about this game is super exciting. Like he can really manipulate opponents at the line. He can fake them and step out and then land a shot at the net, or he can just dangle his way through the slot if he wants to. So he has that high level of skill, and he's very physical too. He's pretty good at defending the home plate around the net. So he has the physicality, the offensive skills. He can move the puck really well. It's just the skating and his age. When you have an older player, you tend to project that his skating won't improve as much. So that's why we placed him a bit conservatively at like 40, 39 actually, but he could be a first rounder. Like I could see a team reaching and grabbing him and having a really solid top 4 defenseman for a while.
Yeah, in terms of like most exciting players in the draft, he's top 10 just for like the sheer chaos that he creates, the inventive stuff that he does from the point, how he beats guys off the blue line, the passes that he tries. There's a lot of Mason Lohrei in his game.
Yeah, and that's our come for him, and it really fits, honestly. Draft report is largely complimentary of Villeneuve in spite of his mid-80s placement. Is it just a lack of high upside thing? I like him more early mid round 2. Seems built for playoff hockey. What do you think?
Yeah, you could easily place him there on our board, and it would make perfect sense. The difficulty with this draft is that there are so many guys in that same range, in that same mold. I think with Villeneuve, I don't know if there's a ton of upside because the feel for the offensive side isn't quite as natural, though he does have some skill. Like you see him take pucks to the middle instantly on pass receptions. It's just that he tends to circle away from battles. He tends to circle high and away. He doesn't necessarily pass through traffic all the time. He's not manipulating defenders. So I think for me, he's probably more of a 3W or 4C projection, but there's a chance for a little bit more. And again, like the commenter said, like this is a guy who, when you look at playoff hockey, he's very much built for it. He has the physicality and also that craziness to go with it.
Yeah. Jay Brar wants to know if I'm Martin St. Louis' brother. I am not. Although he was my favorite player growing up. I have no family ties to him, but it's pretty. It was just I was a kid, so he had the same last name as me, so it was pretty easy for me to pick him as my favorite player. But I have no family ties with him. Blue Jackets threads. Okay, that wasn't a question. It's just a compliment. Thank you. Adam Gourmet, who are the Habs most likely to pick up? I think that's pretty much Cayden Lindstrom. That's the guy we've heard. They've been linked to like 8 or 10 different prospects now, so they seem to be drafting everyone. But the main guy I think that fits what they want, what they need, and fits their structure and philosophy is really Cayden Lindstrom. Like he's large. He has the skating ability, the power game, and they value that. We saw that with Slafkovsky, and he has that development runway, similar to Slafkovsky again. He just recently started playing more competitive hockey. Mitch can talk about this, but it's really, he has all the tools and a lot of possible hockey sense development, and we like his playmaking game, like his scoring game, and the way he gets to the net, and his defensive game improved during the year, so he has those details too. So he has pretty much everything. You can plug him anywhere in the lineup, at center, at wing, so he's their perfect pick, I think. And if I'm in their team, I think that's who they're going to target. But there's also Ivan Demidov. They passed on Mitchkov last year. It's a way for them to repair that mistake. It was we can argue if it was a mistake or not, but like it's a similar type of player with even more creative, with better motor, and really, really exciting. It would just add something that would make spectators go to games. Honestly, he has that kind of creativity. He's super at ease creating, dangling through layers of defenses. So, and he's really, really smart too. He's one of my favorite players in the draft. I think they should target Demidov if he's available, but I think the Habs probably want Lindstrom more. Nothing to add. Okay. Blackhawks fan, who would be your pick at number 2, and what's the upside with taking Levshunov there? I just talked about Ivan Demidov. That would be my pick at number 2. I think he actually doesn't have the size, but I think now it might not even be true. It might be 6'1", he might be 6 feet, he might be 5'11". We don't know exactly. I think we're going to have the official measurements tomorrow, but that doesn't matter. Like, he's just super creative, and he's going to work with anyone you plug him with, and if it's Connor Bedard, it's just going to amplify his talents, and he's already very talented. So I want to see that. I want to see that pair. So that's what I would do at number 2. But Levshunov, we talked a bit about him before. Again, Levshunov has everything. He has that foundation for a number 1 defenseman. I think Mitch can probably better talk about him a bit again.
Yeah, I think the fit, particularly with Chicago, was quite good because you're getting a defenseman that you can potentially build around. And if he doesn't end up at that level, you're still getting someone who can play the number 2, number 3 role effectively. He has the size, the mobility, the physicality, the skill from the point. Some of the stuff that he does is right there with some of the other more exciting blue liners in this draft. Not to say that he's doing it at the same frequency, but as I mentioned earlier, there are also some environmental factors there to be considered. For him, it just comes down to really the development side. Like, can Chicago help him achieve his upside? And I'm not familiar with Chicago's development structure, so I can't answer that question. But if they believe that they can, then 100% you pick him second overall. If they think that he's a number 1 defenseman, which I think anyone who's watched him can agree that he certainly has the potential to get there, then it makes perfect sense to do it.
Max Walder asks, is the Nate Danielson most boring top pick award a 2-horse race between Helenius and Brandsegg-Nygard? And I think you nailed that one, unfortunately.
This is a question for David if I've ever heard one. Wow.
I'm going to try to stay polite here and everything. No. It's just that I'm not as big of a fan of Helenius as some others on our team, so I think some others would disagree with me here, but I think, yes, you nailed that comparison. Brandsegg-Nygard fits what the Detroit valued in past drafts. He's very similar to Kasper that they draft recently, except he has a better shot, maybe not the same pure defensive ability in terms of reads, but he has the same kind of forecheck game, same kind of skating, so it might be a slightly better version of Kasper in some aspects. The details go to Kasper though. And Helenius is all details. I like the hockey sense, the smarts, but it's really hockey sense in terms of decision making, the ability to make the right play at the right time, vision, but not necessarily ability to deceive and manipulate as much as a Catton, let's say. So I think they're pretty boring but effective picks, and that matters. So I might not like them as much as others, but I think where Detroit is picking, I don't remember where, probably in the teens somewhere, it's probably a good idea to still target them. I think they're valuable pick there, and they're similar to other prospects who have higher upside, but maybe not the same kind of floor. So it's just a matter of what you value as a scouting team, and Detroit tends to put a premium on floor. So I think they might target them, but at the same time, it might be time for them to target someone with higher upside, a more interesting player like Liam Greentree, who should be available where they pick, who doesn't have the same kind of floor because he plays a bit of a weird game sometimes. He's a big guy who relies a lot on his hands, not as much on his physicality all the time, but he's very, very creative, and if he works out, you got a top line forward. So I might not lean those two players at their pick, but they're pretty good anyway. Jean-Maurice asks, Levshunov, I think Dickinson for Chicago for a D, and Demidov for F. And we already talked about Demidov. You can talk about Dickinson if you want, Mitch.
Yeah, so for me, they are pretty analogous together, right? Like Levshunov, Dickinson, two guys who are kind of more scratching the surface of what they can become with the puck rather than refined products. You're getting a more faster, explosive player in Dickinson compared to Levshunov, but with Levshunov, you're getting more creation ability, more activation, more willingness to try to create offense. Dickinson is a bit of a mistake-prone player in a different way than Levshunov is. Levshunov's mistakes are a lot of like passing into pressure, passing into traffic. Dickinson's mistakes tend to be more taking himself out of position to chase or throwing a puck away blindly up the middle of the rink. He tends to be a little bit more prone to like mishandling pucks, losing pucks with his narrow kind of handling base. He really kind of wants it a little bit up in front of his hip pocket, and he kind of like turns around the puck. And if guys get inside his reach, they easily take it away from him because he's not protecting it in the same way. And he's also not giving himself the same reach that Levshunov has to be able to fully control the puck from his hip pocket all the way to his backhand and across his body. Both guys certainly have top pair upside, make no mistake. The difference for us with where we rank them, 4 versus 10, was purely in the certainty of getting there. We believed more in Levshunov's superior skill level, superior offensive creativity, more active activation game from the point. That didn't make much sense, but I think I made my point clear. Where Dickinson's superior mobility and probably better defensive details at this stage didn't quite outweigh it.
Pirignol wants to know, what is Ben Danford? Defenseman, but I think he wants to know more about his game. So that's probably a question for you. I think you have the better picture of him.
Yeah, so Ben Danford is primarily a defensive defenseman, but in a very modern mold. When we look at modern defensemen, we're looking at ability to defend the rush, ability to get back and win retrievals, and then make quick plays through the forecheck to a high-valued breakout target. That's his game. That's the core of his projection. He's great at surfing into players, absorbing rushes, and he's also great at timing poke checks to be able to kill rushes. When he goes back for the puck, he checks over both shoulders. He wins body positioning. He can deceive inside space a little bit. And he has the backhand forehand skill to be able to quickly work a puck through the forecheck, find an open teammate. And then occasionally he'll do something crazy like join the rush and throw a spinning hook pass into the slot, or walk into the top of the circle, fake a shot, and pass it cross ice. So you're getting someone who is likely to play in the NHL in a defensive role and has just enough puck skills, just enough mobility, just enough activation game and vision flashes to be able to project him into a higher part of the lineup if he taps into that side of his game more.
Hubert Samson wants to know, if Demidov is off the board at 5, considering Lindstrom injury uncertainty, do you go with a D for the Habs? I think it's a possibility for them, honestly. They are pretty valuable forwards still that would target like TJ Ginla and maybe Berkly Catton, but I know they probably don't want to go that way because of the size factor. And Beckett Seneca, I think they're all very good players to target in this area. And we've said this a lot of times before. The prospects between like maybe 3, 4 to about 14 on our board all have about the same value. So if you want, this is a draft that if you want to draft for needs, and I think the Habs want to target a forward, I think it's more justifiable than other classes previously because of how close these players are together. That said, after Cayden Lindstrom, we have Levshunov. He's probably going to be gone there, and Zayne Parekh before TJ Ginla. And I think Parekh would fit really nicely in Montreal. They have Lane Hutson. They have a similar player as Parekh, but Parekh is a premium version. He's a better skater, and the way he makes plays. Mitch just wrote an article about it, but I can summarize it, and you can jump in after if you want. The way he makes plays is very NHL translatable. We gave him a Quinn Hughes comparable, and it's not because he's elite skater. He has that high-end skating ability, but it's mostly about the way he shoots from the point and makes short passes to get around defender. He's going to aim for sticks around the net. He's very good at that. He aims for rebounds to give teammates easy tap-in shots after that. And he makes plays in short possessions. That's going to translate very well to the NHL level, while Lane Hutson tends to want to dance around and keep the puck to try and find something. And that's something that's not as translatable. He performed very well against Detroit in those last 2 games, but I think there's more certainty with Parekh than Hutson. He's a bit bigger too, more physical on defense. The defensive game is going to be easier for him. So you just get safer, similar type Lane Hutson projection with Parekh, and I would still target him. And we've heard Zeev Buium, super smart defenseman who's really good in the 2 ways. So in all 3 zones, he was really good defensively at the end of the year, shutting down really top forwards. He anticipates the game super well defensively. He can make plays at the line, a bit like Parekh, but not at the same level at all. But still very, very good. Like there's a gap between Parekh and Buium, but there's also a gap between Buium and Dickinson and Silayev. Like he's good offensively, not just to the same level as Parekh. So he can impact all three zones, and his skating is good enough. He has enough size, so I think he projects at a top 4, maybe top pair defenseman, that kind of ceiling. So I would target still these two prospects. But again, if they want a forwards and they jump and if overlook these two defensemen and select a forward and not these two defensemen, I think it's still going to be a good pick for them. So honestly, the answer is it doesn't really matter because there's a lot of highly valuable pieces there, but I would not shy away from targeting a D, even if they need a forward more.
I love Montreal taking a defenseman, to be honest, because you already have so many defensemen in your prospect pool, but I mean, the odds are half of them are going to make it, a quarter of them are going to make it. And then you add in the fact that some of them are going to be premium assets. Like they have a lot of size, they have a lot of mobility. These are guys who you can trade to get premium assets, to get more picks, to add forward prospects or whatever. Because as we see time and time again, for the most part, defensemen are more valuable on the market than forwards are. And so I really like the fit, especially because with Parekh, you get the dynamic high-end offensive element. With Buium, you get the diversity of skill. You also get some high-end potential in terms of the offensive game and the two-way impact. So I think they're great. I think both of them are great fits for what Montreal is trying to do. And on top of that, it really gives them a different element. Say they pick one of those guys and they hit. It gives them a different element on their blue line, but it also means that their blue line is likely going to control the game the majority of the time that they're on the ice. We know how Montreal likes to play. It's a lot of spacing in the offensive zone, a lot of activation, a lot of movement, trying to draw switches and changes of coverage to create. And that all starts with what your defensemen are capable of.
Yeah, and if they all end up working out, it's probably not going to happen. You can always use them as straight ships later, so you're not stuck with them necessarily. Salty Wings and Habs fan wants to know thoughts on Yegor Surin. Yeah, that's a player who we really like in the first half of the season and going to January and February too, but then the playoffs came around, and while everyone seems to think he performed really amazingly, I think it shined a light on some of his hockey sense problems. He's a player who has an immense motor. Like he can run the length of the ice, forecheck, and he really pursues pucks super hard. He has those handling skills. But in terms of being able to create advantages for his team, see ahead, like he lacks anticipation. He makes some low value plays that works at the junior level, especially in the NHL, but won't work at the next level. I think there's a good chance that he loses a lot of his creativity and only becomes kind of a checker with some flashes of skill from time to time at the next level. To us, it's more of a late second round pick, maybe early third round, than the first rounder like we've seen. Again, he has the size and the motor and enough skating ability and the pace. So maybe an NHL team is going to look at him and they're going to say, oh, that's someone that's probably going to play. And I agree with that. It's just that you won't control his development as much as other prospects do. So that plays in our projection of him a bit. We decided to be more conservative with our rankings. So we don't like him as much as others, but we still respect the intensity and the handling skills. That's fine. We already answered a question about Max Swanson. Yosen Safir. That's a question for Mitch. He's going to love this one. Cole, Hutson, or Lane?
Oh, it's Lane Hutson. Is that really a debate, David? Is that...
No, it's not. But in terms of their draft year, I don't know. Lane was a bit smaller. We had the same doubts as everyone else about his game is going to translate to the NHL level, and then he grew and he showed everything he did in college. It's Lane, of course, with all the information we have right now, but draft year Lane versus draft year Cole, it's still Lane. He was more creative. Yeah. He was more intense, more consistent. Yeah, I think there's a pretty big gap between them, but not like an immense one. We have him in exactly the same spot on our board. So it's just it's just a difference in how we change in our evaluation of prospects, and a difference in draft class that just ends up making it so they're in the same spot. But if we had Lane in this draft class, he probably would be higher now because we would respect the creativity and the potential a bit more.
Yeah, I think Cole does have some advantages over Lane at the same age. He's a lot more physically equipped. He's better at initiating contact, controlling contact as he goes into the boards. He's much less likely to just panic bomb a puck away on the breakout. So there are some advantages there, but really the core of the projection with both Cole and Lane is dynamic offensive player, and Lane was a lot more dynamic at the same age, a lot more inventive with his moves, a lot better at reading momentum and playing off of it than Cole, who tends to be much more of a going off the scripts player.
Thomas Grunborg. Sorry if I butchered those names. I'm trying my best here. Chris Peters recently said that if he was ranking recent top demon, he'd go Dahlin, Sanderson, Levshunov, Power, Nemetz. How would you guys rank the newer ones? Is Levshunov overhyped in your minds? Um, Overhyped by whom? That's always a question. If he goes number 2, we would not draft him number 2. We would have Demidov there. We would draft Lindstrom ahead of him too. But like he's right there, so I don't think he's overhyped. And I think the Blackhawks, if they draft him number 2 and they see a top pairing potential in him, that's fine because it's there. It exists. It's just that you just have to work with him to develop his tactical ability and hockey sense and make sure that he really understands how to use his strengths, but it's there, so he's not overhyped. And he would rank pretty high in that list, but I think it's fine to have him behind Dahlin for sure. Sanderson, are we talking about recent Sanderson or draft year Sanderson? If it's draft year Sanderson, he's probably behind Levshunov. And Power had more hype, but he didn't perform as good as Levshunov in his draft year. So maybe he would rank behind Levshunov, and it was just the strength of that particular draft that would make him maybe rank behind. And he was number 1 in that draft, but maybe if Levshunov was in that draft, he would have been ahead because of I guess he's a very tall defenseman who skated well, who had the flashes of manipulation. What do you think, Mitch? That's a really good question.
Cool. So if we're going back to 2018, then we also have to include Quinn Hughes, Evan Bouchard, Adam Boqvist, Noah Dobson into this. And I think for me, I recently did a draft retrospective on Quinn Hughes. And what I mean by recently is I have no sense of time. So I think it was actually 2 years ago. I did a draft retrospective on Quinn Hughes. And to me, Quinn Hughes is a better prospect than Artyom Levshunov is. And I have been the Artyom Levshunov guy in this chat so far. So definitely behind Dahlin, definitely behind Quinn Hughes. Probably better than Bouchard because you have more confidence in his skating ability. Probably better than Dobson because you have more confidence that he'll develop the offense that Dobson eventually did once he got to the NHL. Then you go to 2019, right? And we have Bowen Byram, who was a very dynamic, explosive, do everything defenseman. And so you probably take Byram over Levshunov based on that. But then it gets kind of interesting in 2019 because you have Philip Broberg. You have Moritz Seider, and Moritz Seider was a player who, me personally, back in 2019, I did not have a good handle on his game or what he could become. But now when I would go back on it, I would assume that now that I am smarter in my advanced age, that I have a better understanding of what a 6'4" defenseman who likes to jump into play and play physically would be valued at. But yeah, it's a really tough one. It's a really tough one. I would probably take Power over him too. You lose some of the aggression, but gain an intelligence. And so the bet would be that Power being more of a thinking player, being someone who plays a little bit slower, someone who plays a little bit more within themselves, would probably find that physicality, would probably find that extra edge with a higher probability than Levshunov. And Drysdale, yeah, you take Levshunov over Drysdale, you take him over Sanderson. 2021, that's another, because it's Luke Hughes, Simone Edvinsson, Brant Clark. You probably have to take him over all those guys because of the uncertainty that each of them brought. But the one that I'm getting hung up on is, how do you value Reinbacher versus Nemetz versus Juracek versus Minchikov versus Levshunov? The 2022 D draft debate is still going on at Elite Prospects. Should we revive it for this?
Yeah. Nemetz would still be at the end for me.
Yeah.
Of all these, like I know what he did in his rookie season in the NHL, but I think he's just more of vanilla top 4 defenseman is going to be good at everything, but not exceptional at anything except activating. And to be exceptional at activating, you need to have a system that permits those kind of activations. They had that last year. I'm not sure going into this year it's going to be the same kind of permission for him. So we'll see. I still like Jiricek more than Mats for sure. In terms of the debate between Levshunov and Vanacker, and I'm sure we've really spent a lot of time on this question, but I'm sure many people are interested in comparison between these two prospects with the amount of Habs fan we have in the chat probably. And I think it's Levshunov ahead, just because of the tools are slightly better and there's more, I think, tactical game flashes in Levshunov, like the way he manipulates at the line, the playmaking flashes, they're better for Levshunov, and he scored more points too, so the production and the stats are in favor. I think I would have him ahead, but he would be right behind. And who is the other guy that we were forgetting?
Minchikov.
Oh yeah, maybe it would be like it's hard to separate what we know now. In his draft year, there were more concerns about him, but that tactical game and ability to activate and find soft spots in the defensive zone and participate in the offensive zone flow, it was already very, very developed in him in his draft year. So maybe we would be tempted to rank him ahead. It's really a question of, it's something we have to write an article on and think more about. So we will just leave it at that and move on, because we can spend 2 hours on this question. Jean-Maurice has some choices for the Habs at 26. We already talked about Surin. I would not draft him at 26. I think it's too high. Solberg, very good choice, but he's going to be gone. I think he's a top 16, top 17 prospect now in this draft after his World Championship. One team is going to really fall in love with him and just draft him super high. We already talked about Moritz Seider. It's the same kind of recipe, except the ingredients are not as high quality, but he has all the tools. He's very capable of engaging opponents, very violent, and he wants to influence the game and to be a difference maker. And he's very interesting as a prospect. It's just that everything has to improve a bit for him to really become a solid top 4 defenseman, and he comes from a lesser known league, so there's some risk there. Boisvert, I don't like him as much as Mitch, but he fits really that ranking, that 26 overall pick. I think he's a good candidate there. Mitch can talk about him after. And Luchanko. So I guess you should talk about Boisvert and Luchanko rapidly if you can.
Yeah, so Boisvert is kind of the perfect middle 6 fit, I think, for most teams. He's skilled, he can shoot, he can pass, he can deke through opponents, he can make plays with pace, he can slow the game down. He's physical, he's very details oriented. It's just going to come down to developing the higher end pace of his game a little bit more and continuing to improve his skating. And Luchanko is kind of an interesting one, because I think for us, the pushing Luchanko up the board, which everyone did, came later. It was kind of in the last month or two of the season, whereas people were kind of in on him in December, January. He's, for me, more of a third line center, a retrieval playmaker type, someone who can get in, win pucks, quickly find the open teammate, and if they don't score, he'll pop into space at the right time and be able to finish off a play. I really like his physical game, in particular how he wins body positioning, how he gets inside the hands, how he spins off checks and times his movements to the net perfectly. I'm not sure it all comes together into a top 6 package, but he does have those flashes that he could get there in time.
Zachary again. Who do you like as a boom or bust goal scorer? Example, Gridden and Poirier. Do we see Gridden as a boom or bust goal scorer?
It's kind of, yeah, to an extent. I feel like Gridden's a lot of prospects in one, where you're getting the potential that he could become something more, but more likely he ends up kind of being a bottom 6 forward who gets pucks, makes skilled plays inside space, but his game is more about retrievals, winning, spinning off checks, extending the cycle, and so on, rather than creating off the cycle. It's a tough one to answer, because I think with the way the draft goes, I think that's probably, it's probably 2 guys, really. It's probably Tomas Mircek, who has one of the best shots in the draft, probably a top 5 shot in the draft. He plays with a ton of pace. It's just coming down to, does he have the playmaking to support the shot? Does he have the timing and the awareness to get open inside space for his shot? And then the other one would be Noah Powell, who scored like a goal per game in the last 2/3 of the season. He's a re-entry. The skating's a problem, but he's extremely creative, pulls pucks off the wall. He scores some crazy goals, whether he's dangling people in tight or scoring from slappers as he curls off the boards high. Like some of the stuff that he does is ridiculous, and the playmaking is even better. So yeah, there are a lot of guys who would kind of fit in that. Like Kevin He, like he's probably a checker, but he does have the shot for more. Carson Wetch is in the same mold. Lucas Elenas too. Like it's a really interesting draft if you're looking to add some goals in the mid rounds.
Deng Schnizzle. I genuinely feel on an island in Hauxland when I say Levshunov is still a really good direction our team can take. We talk a lot about Levshunov. I should just clarify what I said at the start. I think they are...
That you're a hater and you think that he's the worst prospect that you've ever seen? Yeah, I know.
I was trying to fix Zoom at the same time. It was pretty hard for me. I think there are prospects who have higher pure offensive upside, who can really dictate your team's play and control it. But Levshunov is going to be... I think he's going to be as good as your team. So if you lack structure at the beginning and you are a rebuilding team and you insert him in your lineup too fast, you're going to see a lot of mistakes because he's not that kind of calm everyone down and play a shutdown game and move the puck safely up the ice all the time. He's more of a guy who is going to work super well in a stronger system at some point, and it could make him a number one because he has all the tools. He can engage, he can shut down passing lane, he can move the puck, he can participate in the offensive zone if it's a little plays, he can deceive. It's just that he needs slightly better conditions to do this than Zayne Parekh or Zeev Buium, who can better create plays out of nothing. But if you look at number one Ds in the defenseman, even someone like Victor Edmond, who can do a bit of those things like Zayne Parekh, he's mostly someone who benefited from a great system, who just amplified his strength. And I think the better your team is going to be, the more you're going to like Levshunov and the more you're going to think that he's their number one. And even if he fails, you're still going to get a guy who's a top four defenseman for sure, who can play just a two-way calmer role and contribute anyway. So he's going to need some development. Don't rush him, but he's a very good option at number two. Sebastian, hi, hello. Wants us to talk about Stian Solberg. We just talked about him, so I hope you're satisfied. Salty Wings fan, again, wants to know more about Raoul Boilard, and he wants to know if he has a 3C ceiling. I think we've come down a bit on Boilard. We were really excited about this game in December, maybe, when he was really going through production stretch and he was performing better. But at the end of the year, he didn't have the same energy to his game, the same consistency. I think he's still a physical guy who skates decently well, who can make some really impressive playmaking plays at times. So there are flashes of more that could lead him to become a 3C. But I think his projection, if we're safe and realistic, if he makes the NHL, it's more like your 4C center, I think. There's a higher chance of that, especially because he didn't produce that much in his draft year, and that's not something that's a good indicator. He was also not playing with the top players in Baie-Comeau, so you have to factor that in, but maybe not enough skills that will lead him to take charge of a game to really become a 3C. I think it's more of a two-way projection down your lineup.
I also think, too, that part of the reason why he fell down the board was because there were so many guys in a similar mold and or defensemen who could become number 4, number 5, or even number 3s who rose, right? Like some of his falling was Sam O'Reilly's ascension, who we placed at 48 but could have very easily ended up in the 30s. It's the rise of Javon Moore, Blake Montgomery, AJ Spellisy, Jacob Battaglia, who kind of pushed him further down. Lots of players who could fill the same role, but have that little bit of extra upside that we weren't necessarily seeing with him down the stretch.
Thomas, again, ask a pretty deep question. I don't know how to answer this one. How would you guys compare Demidov to recently high-drafted wingers like Kakko, Lafrenière, Slavkovsky, Gauthier, Benson, Leonard, Michkov, and Martin, upcoming draft? So that's a bit too deep for us to answer this, but I think he's generally in that level of talent when we're talking about Lafrenière and Kakko, Slavkovsky. Like he's a pretty unique prospect. He's hard to compare to these prospects because he doesn't look like any one of them. Maybe Michkov because he plays in the same kind of league, so it's easier to compare. But in terms of talent, Michkov was someone who was really smart away from the puck, who was a super great opportunistic scorer who would find soft spots in the offensive zone and score from timing himself in those spots and get passes and shoot in the net. His shot in general was a bit better. He was just a cerebral player who would just orchestrate your full offense by moving in spots and by passing constantly. But Demidov is just hyper creative. He's more like your Kaprizov or Patrick Kane if a Hawks fan are watching. So he controls the game with the puck on his stick. That's more Lafrenière in his draft year, but Lafrenière didn't end up becoming that in the NHL because he's now playing more of a supportive scoring role next to a player who looks more like Demidov in Panarin. So he doesn't compare to any one of these players, but he's in the same kind of level of talent. There's just more risk with his projection than many of these prospects because of the league he plays in, because of his weird skating, the 10 and 2 thing that he does all the time. He's not a traditional NHL skater, and because he's developing in Russia, so you don't have as much control over his contract and development. So comparable, but not really.
I mean, he's coming over. He's coming over next season, right?
I know.
Like, not like the season after the next one. I don't think that's really a big deal.
I'm just stating what others think in this one. Jean-Maurice, that's just a statement. I don't necessarily agree with you. I would have it the other way around, I think. Dan Schnitzel, maybe lofty, but could you give your most underrated prospect for each pool of team picking in the top 5? So that's the Hawks, Habs, Anaheim, Columbus, and am I missing someone, or is that 5? I'm not good at math. We just forgot the Sharks, who's picking number 1. Do we have someone who's underrated?
The most underrated option for them, for the Sharks?
No, I mean the most underrated prospect in their pool.
Oh, okay. Most underrated. See, this is a hard one to gauge because I don't keep up with this at all.
I can try to.
Yeah, like I don't know what people are saying about other prospects.
Yeah, you have to take into account public opinion and then what you believe of these prospects, and then remember their full prospect pool. Pretty hard question. We can attempt for some teams if it comes to mind. Like I think now with the Habs, which prospect? I think Owen Beck. We like him more than most other public analysts. I think we can position ourselves against him in that way. I think he has more of a 3C upside than some others. We see him as a bottom line forward. I think his offense didn't shine as much in the OHL at times, but that's mostly because he was in systems that didn't favor as much offense or his strengths. So I think just because of his checking potential, his ability to play physically, his defensive game, his ability to support others, and his shot too. He has those enough elements to become that 3C for Montreal, I think. It's more of the optimistic prediction. Realistic is still 4C, but we believe in him more than general public. The Sharks, who did he draft recently?
I would say Cameron Lund for me personally. I think he's someone who's pretty exciting player, has some power element with the way he takes the puck to the net hard. He also has a delay game, some crafty playmaking. He's a player who I think could really grow into a third line wing role and someone who adds a different element to the Sharks.
For Anaheim, someone who's under.
Oh, this is a good one because the answer could be all of them.
Yeah.
I mean, realistically, the Mitchell Brown thing would be to say Rodwin Denizio.
Oh, yeah, of course, it's the one.
So he's had a very interesting. He was undrafted, and then he was we ranked him both years that he was eligible for the draft, and he is just a very interesting, unlike any other player defenseman that there is, because it's all weird playmaking plays from the point or activation and passing down low, deception, constantly trying to shift players. The defense has improved a lot, and I think at the World Juniors we saw NHL professional hockey player Rodwin Denizio, someone who still had the same creativity but really calmed the game down a little bit more. And so he went from kind of being this interesting later round guy to being now a legitimate NHL prospect.
For Columbus, I think it could be William Whitelaw. He didn't score a lot in college this season, but he was not playing the minutes needed to score that much or in a system to score that much. He has really, his tools are amazing. Like he has the skating ability, the shooting ability. He can dangle. And we think his hockey sense, we see his hockey sense as better than most. So I think next year in a different situation, because I think he's changing system, if I'm seeing this correctly. Yeah. I don't remember where it's going, but it's going to be different. So it's going to have
He's going to Michigan.
Yeah, okay.
Which is an amazing fit.
That's much better. I think his skill is going to shine a lot more, and we'll see the top 9, maybe even top 6 potential we envisioned for him in his draft year. And for Chicago, I think it's pretty easy. It's Ethan Del Mastro, who we love from his draft year. He's a big physical defenseman who can make plays. He was a bit chaotic at first in his OHL years, but he's improving in his details and becoming even better as a shutdown defenseman. But he can bring the offense too. And I think Chicago is earning a reputation as a good development system for defensemen, at least. In terms of when they go through their AHL team, we've seen Vlasic improve a lot. So I'm confident that he's going to be able to reach maybe a number 4 role at some point. He still needs some development, but we really like him.
That's Levshunov's music.
Yeah, exactly. Would you say MBN is a good transition player? So that's Brandsegg-Nygard, in the sense that he skates really fast in a straight line and can make short passes. Yes, it's going to make him a great transition player with teammates who know how to exploit more of the east-west ice. So if he's there to push back the defense and create space underneath for teammates, if he's there to run ahead of breakouts and get passes, or just again push back the defense, or just use his speed to really beat them along the boards, he's going to shine in some systems. But he's not a good transition player in terms of being able to beat neutral zone defenses out of nothing. Like he doesn't have that kind of capability, like Berkly Catton or Macklin Celebrini, for example. So I would say it depends where he goes. It's not one of his main strengths. He's just a really good skater. Could you see Logan Ensler being a top 7 prospect next year?
Yes, absolutely.
Probably, yeah.
Explosive skater, loves to jump into the play, can make some crazy things happen. He is also a little bit raw, but it's not unusual to see these late birthday NTDP players improve significantly once they go to college. Look at Zeev Buium, who the best hockey he's ever played, from the time I've been watching him, was in the NCAA.
Sean Jensen wants us to talk about Muse. He has seemingly been an enigma for a lot of scouts with differing opinions this season. How much have there been differing opinions on him amongst the EP staff? Not a lot. We're all pretty much aligned, and that's probably more of a topic for Mitch, but it's just that we don't know what he's going to be exactly at the NHL level. Like, he has offense. He can dangle some defenders sometimes. He can jump in spot, create backdoor plays, and he can orchestrate the play a bit in the offensive zone, but he's not at the Zayne Parekh level. His defensive game has a ton of holes in it right now, and he's a slow-paced player in the sense that he takes a bit of time, too much time to make his play sometimes, and his breakout game needs to improve, I think, too. So there's a lot of flaws. The tools are interesting, and the offensive game is good but not great, so it's maybe hard to project. He could really improve the next year and the year after, build on his tools, on his foundation, and really become a more complete defenseman, but he's more of a second round project, I think. What do you think?
Yeah, he has great activation instincts. He can make some really creative plays. He's very smooth and controlled. It just comes down to where exactly does he fit in an NHL lineup. He's one of those guys who I think there's a real chance that he's a tweener, where he does a lot in the AHL, but he doesn't quite have enough of that one special thing, the power play ability, the even strength offense, the rush defense, the physicality, or so on and so forth, where all those areas just fall a little bit short to earn him an NHL role. But he also has a really strong base, so there's a chance that when you look at him in a year or two, and then you look at our 53rd overall ranking, it looks 20 spots, 30 spots too low.
If both Demidov and Lindstrom are gone at 5, should Montreal go for Seneca or Iginla? We have Iginla ahead. pretty close together. I think if we had seen more of Seneca, like if the season continued and he continued to improve at his rate, maybe he would have moved ahead. Maybe he would be in our top 5 because he has that kind of handling skills and he's really exciting and he can beat players one-on-one better than Iginla, and he has that higher level of creativity than Iginla. Iginla is just a more complete player, and he can also do those things at a lesser level. So he can do a bit of everything. His shot is high-end, and his physical game is even better than Seneca. So Seneca might be bigger, larger, but Iginla is all about the details, like the way he uses his arm and the way he skates through the hands of opponents to really to keep his feet moving and avoid being pinned to the boards, and the way he spins off check to create offense inside. So he has all of those refined professional skills on top of the high-end shot, on top of the playmaking. So he's just a more refined player who, just like Seneca, was improving constantly during the year. So they're both on upward development curve and both accelerating at the same rate. It's just that Seneca has more exciting elements, Iginla has more professional elements. I could say it like this.
Exactly.
Who should New Jersey take at 10? What do they need exactly? They have a ton of young defensemen that are interesting. Maybe a winger. They have their top 2 centers. Iginla would be a good pick. Seneca, we just talked about them. There would both be a really good pick. And who did they tend to draft? Like, what's their structure and philosophy? Any idea?
Who do they tend to draft? They like bigger guys typically. Think like Lenny Haminaho, Cole Brown up front, Josh Philman a few years back. Defense tends to be more of activating types, kind of not necessarily creative players, although they do draft the occasional creative one, but more bigger guy, can jump into the play. Just high activity players in general is more or less what they look at. So I think, I mean, there's a lot of that in this draft, straight up. And at 10, you're in a great position to be able to nab one of these top guys. Like, how sick would it be if New Jersey gets Berkly Catton?
Yeah.
Like, that would be super cool because you have someone who shares a lot of similarities with Jack Hughes. And we see what Jack Hughes does in the NHL. And then you have Berkly Catton kind of sitting there in the 2C role. They have lots of strong wingers. They have lots of guys who can get to the net. And so Berkly Catton would be, if I'm looking at that, that's probably the dream right there.
I wonder if like Sam Dickinson would fall all the way to 10. It's possible. He could go really high or just fall a bit. Like, honestly, you're in pretty good position because you see everyone picking ahead and then you just choose the remaining high value guy on your list, honestly. And wherever you go, you can't go that wrong, I think, in this draft.
Yeah, the top 10 is like 15, 16 names long. And being at 10, you're going to be able to pick one of your guys.
Yeah, probably someone you have at like 3 or 4 on your list, honestly.
Yeah.
Could you name 5 players who could fit the archetype of built for the playoffs? Probably. There's a ton of them in this draft.
Yeah. How deep do we want to go? Do we want to do like 2 firsts and 3 guys later in the draft?
Okay.
So
I'll go for the earlier guys because you know the depth of this draft better than me. I'm going to avoid the easy answers here and pick. Already talked about Stian Solberg. Who did we not think about? I'm going to pick.
No Basha mention yet?
Who?
No Andrew Basha mention?
Yeah, I thought about him, but I also saw Teddy Stiga, and I thought he's a smaller guy, but his game is kind of built for the kind of setting. So I'm going to. He's not like your typical big forward who is going to run the net and work the boards, all this, but he does it a bit like Iginla, I talked before, all with the details and the way he positions his body and his ability to really get inside and use his lower center of mass as leverage to win pucks, and he has that tenacity and the motor. So I think even if he's on the smaller side, he has that. He's a big game player. I think he has that intelligence and the physical skills to still thrive in that kind of setting. So he's kind of the underrated playoff performer. And there are a ton of obvious ones. I should just pick one. Like we talked about Iginla, and give me another one.
Charlie Ellick.
Yeah.
That's a guy who's gonna suck to play in the playoffs.
Yeah, he's just built for that kind of setting. Like he's big, he's mobile, and he's highly, highly physical too. There's Stian Solberg we talked about. So or a bunch of names the first round, and in the top 10, like Lindstrom, Iginla, Seneca, I think in time is going to be really good in the playoffs too.
Celebrini, of course, he's going to be a playoff force.
Buium, I think he already showed he can perform very well in big games too, and he has that physical mean streak too. And later in the draft.
Yeah, later in the draft for me, the first guy that comes to mind is Sam O'Reilly. Not just because he did it with London, but because he just has that sort of, I'm going to get back into play, I'm going to work everybody, and then I'm not going to throw the puck away. I'm going to try to create something. And I think he has that real drive to his game, that real, what do people call it, pushback? Like someone leans on you and then you just cross-check him to the ice. That's him. That's what he does. And we mentioned Villeneuve already. So I'll go a little bit deeper and say Nate Miskey, Victoria Royals defenseman. He's a 6'3" right shot D who takes great pride in inflicting pain on people. He's one of those defensemen who he won't just hit you. He'll wait for you to try to get up and then knock you over. Or then he'll elbow you in the head. Or then he'll toss your stick away. He just kind of gets in everyone's way, creates a little bit more space for everyone. And then he can activate in the play and create a little bit of offense. And there are some other guys too, like Torrey Pittner, Blake Montgomery, who stand out to me, but I want to give a shout out to Brody Zeemer, a National Development Team program captain who, I mean, that guy, this season, big moment player. He really shone in the international spotlight. Curl and drag shots, one of the best in the draft. He's physical. He creates with his physicality. One of those rare players who doesn't just hit people into the boards, but can get inside the hands, and then find an open teammate.
In your, no, I missed someone. No, that's fine. In your mock draft, you see the Habs picking Parekh at 5. Considering all the defense prospect we have, don't you think we should go for Iginla or Seneca? I'm not sure if you're talking about the mock draft we released previously that I don't remember, or our actual board. Probably our board. If it's our board, it's not a mock draft. It's really how we would pick these players if we went on a draft floor and had our own list. So it's really our own draft list. It's not a mock draft, and that's a distinction right there. For the Habs, if we were to make their list, I think Parekh would still be a good candidate at 5, but we already talked about Cayden Lindstrom, Ivan Demidov, and I think Seneca and Iginla that you mentioned are also pretty good pick, and we already talked about their distinctive skill sets. Jean-Maurice says,
just realized we made a mistake. We forgot to mention even his name, Cole Baudin, for the playoff thing. I mean, that's the number one playoff guy right there.
How could we forget Baudin? And he's one of our favorite players in the draft. Like, he's just pure strength, pure ball of energy and power, and going to the net and working the boards like he does. You just imagine your perfect playoff performer. That's him. Jean-Marie says, for me, Lindstrom is just a more talented Milan Lucic. So you probably have hockey sense concerns for him. We don't. We really project his hockey sense as above average. You should talk about this, Mitch.
Yeah, so there's a lot of Lindstrom discourse that to me is a little strange, where it's like, oh, because this guy is 6'3" and can outskate everyone, he should instead cut back and find a trailer and start great passing plays, which he does sometimes. The difference is that Lindstrom has all the high-end elements. He just uses them in a different frequency because the game, the OHL or the WHL game, that is, lets him dominate with the things that he currently has, right? He's a guy who can take the puck to the net over and over and over and over again on WHL. And so he does it half the time or whatever. And then the other half the time, he's being more translatable, more creative in ways that you would generally expect a top forward prospect to look like. I think with regards to hockey sense in particular, I personally don't understand why there are concerns about it. I think a lot of it is just he's going to adapt. He has all these skills. He makes the same high-end manipulation plays. He can delay off the rush and find the trailer. He can make all sorts of crazy passes. It just is really going to come down to altering the frequency, which I think that's a natural curve that development for pretty much every player has. You know, we talked about Beckett Seneca. He's going to have to do that. He's not going to be able to dangle everyone one-on-one in the NHL. And he's certainly not going to be able to dangle everyone in the NHL one-on-one in some of the ways that he does it. So he's going to have to adapt his game just like every other prospect before him in some capacity. Do I think Lindstrom is an elite thinker of the hockey game, like, say, Macklin Celebrini? No, but I also think Lindstrom has shown that he's a guy who has improved significantly at an accelerated rate that most prospects can't. It's easy to forget that he was not a top prospect entering the WHL. He was a third round pick who then a year later was playing center for the first time in his life in the WHL and continually adding more and more and more to his game to be able to become this top three potential pick in the draft class. So I don't see any real similarities with Lucic. I mean, he doesn't even have the same level of physicality as Lucic. Lindstrom is very physical, but Lindstrom is more of a physicality for offense, whereas Lucic is very much about, just diabolical violence.
Yeah, and Lindstrom is going to play in a very creative environment over next year and even after, if he gets drafted by the Habs. I think he's coachable, and you'll see his game evolve in more tactical ways as the season goes on. What do you think about Thomas Galvas? I really like him. He's just a player you have to draft a bit later. I think we've learned that over the years. We used to push those players a bit higher on our board, and he has some pretty big fans in our team. Like G. Burke really likes him, and Marek, our scout too. But the issue is that his main dimension, as I see it, is defense right now. So he's really smart about reading passing lanes and cutting them with his stick and moving his feet to always be in the right spot or nearest check and shutting down even 2-on-1 against them. Like, I think it's really something that shines in his game, and he can carry the puck out. His skating is really high end. It's just that he doesn't show enough offense like a Cole Hutson or these other smaller defensemen who project well to the NHL to really project him to the NHL, in the sense that when you're smaller as a defenseman, you need that one special ability, and it's often offense. Because if it's defense, like for Galvas, as I see it, bigger defensemen are just going to steal your spot because they're going to be doing the same thing as you, but they're going to be larger and have more reach and be even just as mobile as you are. So I think it's going to be hard for him to keep a spot on a winning team in the NHL, but he could end up being like super strong depth and really outshoot our projection because he's smart enough and he has that elite skating ability and he has that motor, and he already has that professional experience. Like he showed more in his draft year than Adam Jiricek in about the same level of competition. So there are elements going for him. It's just that if you're smaller, you really need that special offense to beat out the bigger players for a spot in your lineup. I don't know how familiar you guys are with goalies, but who is your favorite? Sorry, I should not have read this question. We don't know goalies that well.
Luca Cloutier on Chicago Steel.
Okay, that's fine. I agree with you. I don't really know him.
Thank you.
Thomas Emarczyk, we already talked about him. Where do you see him going in the draft? Has he played on a stacked team? Does that affect his draft stock? What do you think about this?
Yeah, so I think he probably goes in the third or fourth round, probably a fair bit lower than where we have him. Certainly playing with more playmaking types does open up opportunities that he wouldn't get elsewhere. But on the other hand, they also dominate the puck a lot more than him. Think McKenna, Andrew Basha. So we didn't really get that great of a look with Thomas Emarczyk, the playmaker, because he's surrounded by playmakers. So what does that look like if he's in a different environment? And there were stretches late in the season where he's taking the puck to the middle more, he's driving the net more, he's showing more of a physical side. And then on top of that, he's adding a little bit more playmaking when he's trying to get to the net. So it's a bit of a tough one to figure out. I'd say that generally it probably doesn't move the needle for me that much, the environment. Certainly not as much as it would for other prospects, but it is something worth considering. The other side of it, though, is that he scored, 25 goals with a top 5 shot in the draft. So with a little bit more luck, with a little bit different looks, he probably would have scored 40.
Next year.
Yes, hopefully.
Frey and Stiga seem to be much higher on public lists than when scouts are asked about them. What do you think they're seeing that doesn't translate to the NHL game? Oh, this is a dangerous territory.
Okay, so I'll start with Stiga, and then you can go. Okay, so with Stiga, I wouldn't be surprised at all if he goes in the first, honestly. Like, I don't know if he's a guy who you pick top 15, but outside of that, he's certainly in that discussion. He's someone who plays fast, he's engaged. He can get to the middle of the rink like crazy in every situation, whether he's leading the rush, he's the F2 off the rush, he's on the boards, he's taking pucks in motion. It doesn't matter. He's going to find a way to get to the inside. And I think when you look at the NHL and how these teams pick, it is true that they value size very heavily, but they also value smaller guys who play with a ton of fire, with a ton of energy. We already talked about Easton Cowan in this stream, but it's the same idea. I wouldn't be surprised at all if Stiga is the guy who goes 25, and then next year he's 1.2 points per game in college.
And Frey, I really like Frey. He's very, very high on some list, and I get why, because of the mobility. Like, he's very graceful skater, and he has all those moves at the line. Like, he can wait for a defender to approach him, and then fake one way, go the other way, and escape to open ice. I think NHL scouts especially are really down on his hockey sense, and I get why. A player who relies mostly on scripts, I could put it like this, and he makes the same moves in the same situations, I feel. So he is a player who learned to play on a larger ice, and he relies on his mobility to create a lot. His feet lead the way more than his reads of the game, so he looks really good in some circumstances when he has open space and when he plays against weaker opposition. But against better defenders, I think he's going to become predictable. And even if he's highly talented in terms of skating, the skating advantage won't be enough for him to continue playing the same type of game. His defensive game is somewhat projectable, more than other defensemen of his type that we've seen in previous years. But it's not a strength. His retrieval game, he can be physical enough to win pucks on the boards and handle the forecheck on his back and absorb it to an extent, but it's not a strength. So for me, my concerns are hockey sense and the development system he's in right now. I don't think it's going to help him work on his weaknesses. It's just going to make him use his strength, his skating, to continue generating plays more and more. So I don't see him becoming strong enough in his professional habits to really become a top 4 NHLer. But I think there's a boom potential with him because of the skating, because of the elusive moves, and because he flashes higher level of hockey sense sometimes. So we have him in top 40, I think, right now, and I think he's going to end up maybe drafted later in the second round unless a team really likes him and reaches for him a bit higher. And I would get why, and I get why people have him super high on their list, but we prefer defensemen who chooses their play based on reads more than players that like Frey.
Yeah, you're looking for, I think this is really dictating the game versus being a part of the game, right? And if you're looking for someone in that archetype, you want a dictator rather than someone who's just jumping into the play constantly.
Is there any risk with Seneca, given he's only looked like a top 10 prospect for half the season? No. I don't think that's an argument. Like, yeah, I see this on Twitter all the time. If it's a guy who had a growth spurt, whose team got better as the season went on, we can talk about the Ricci effect after, and who just constantly got better and his production increased, I think it's fine to just factor in the last months of his season and look at this as his real potential ceiling or as a real projection, because I think the first half didn't really put him under the best of light. But even if you dig deeper and you really look for the plays, really look for what he did well in the first half, I think you would be impressed with some of his plays. But it's really a question for Mitch because he's writing about Seneca.
Honestly, I think we probably should have had Seneca top 20 from the very start of the season.
He was?
I think.
Wasn't he?
I think. I don't know. No, we had him at 22.
That's
so.
fine.
So for me personally, I think he was a guy who created a lot without a ton of help in Oshawa at the start of the season, but he did it in a very awkward way. And it just, when you watch him more and more and more, you start seeing the high-end plays more frequently and the awkwardness less frequently. And then as the second half of the season comes and he starts taking control of games more, then he gets a little bit more stable, the awkwardness dissipates a little bit, and then the high-end creation goes up. And then as for is he a product of Ricci or not, this will be in an article that comes out tomorrow or the day after. But statistically, there isn't really any reason to be concerned about his play with Ricci. Both of them were just as productive in terms of points together as they were apart. So they both obviously scored less when they were apart, but it was roughly at around the same rate as one another. So Seneca without Ritchie and Ritchie without Seneca scored at similar levels. So there's no real reason to be concerned there. And then at a more micro level, I think with Seneca, without Ritchie, you see more of a play driving side, someone who carries the puck more in transition, more of a down low playmaker. But then when he's with Ritchie, Ritchie then is carrying the puck more. Ritchie is then being the down low playmaker to Seneca, more of the off puck scorer, someone who's more going to be the F2 off the rush and create inside space. So to me, the fact that he can do all of that really just speaks to his versatility. He's one of those guys who, sure, there's a chance that it just doesn't quite work, but more likely he will find a way to do it in the NHL. He will find a way because he just has so much versatility, so much adaptability that you don't see with top end prospects, even guys who you pick in the 5 to 10 range.
Orange Boy wants to know, could Ian Law actually fall to the Flames at how low they are in the draft? I think the answer is yes. It's even more likely, I think, than the opposite, because the closer we get to the draft, it feels like the centers and the defensemen all get pushed up on the NHL list. So the NHL teams tend to put a premium on these positions, and it's often safer to draft these positions, and wingers tend to fall. So I think it might be available. The Habs might grab him. He's a player that I could see the Senators really like too. He fits their identity to an extent, so it's possible he might not be there, but I think there's a higher than 50% chance that he's there at the Flames pick. Will they grab him? They might go for a defenseman too. We'll see what actually happens, but it's possible. So there's a question in French. I'm going to translate it as best as I can. Small Budge wants to know what led me to become a scout, and if I would want to do this for a professional team at some point. The answer is yes, but it depends what kind of professional team. So I think the more I'm in this business, I think it really depends on fit. And honestly, working with elite prospects is really amazing. The team is amazing. I love everyone there. So it's super, super fun, like really, really fun. So it would take a lot for me to really leave this position. And I love making content. Like I really love making videos, writing articles and all this. So that's kind of my place. Like it's a perfect fit for me. We'll see what ends up happening in my future. I would like to work in the NHL. It's a dream of mine, but it's not as big of a dream as it used to be, because I see what I have now and I really like it. And what brought me to become a scout, honestly, I was just curious how hockey worked. Like I'm always interested on why things happen, so that's why I make like a ton of Let's Watch video where I break down the details. I think scouting is even in some respects an excuse for me to just look at shifts and players and describe why they're so good and what works for them, what doesn't work, and project them. It's just fun all around. Like it fits everything I like about everything. Thoughts on Yegor Chernyshov? He's a player who is in everyone's top 25, but is a bit quiet. Like there's not as much attention on him, and he's a strong power forward who's very good skater in straight lines and has flashes of amazing handling skills. Like at the MHL level, when he was brought down, he could dangle 2-3 defenders in a row, and at the KHL level, he showed a lot of defensive details. So he's a projectable NHL player because of his defensive game potentially and his checking potential that his frame gives him, and also the offensive potential that his hands give him. It's just that I'm not sure he has the high-end hockey sense to go along with it necessarily. He's more of a power forward projection, and it was very hard to evaluate him because he kept changing levels. He played mostly at the KHL level, and he didn't play a lot of minutes. And when forwards play at the KHL level, they tend to not make as many plays, so it's a bit harder to evaluate them. So we're not sure, I think, collectively, when I'm speaking for other scouts that might have different opinions of him, but what his real ceiling might be. So he might get drafted like at 23 and then outperform 10 players ahead of him. That's entirely possible. He has a small boom potential, I think. It's just there's more uncertainty with him, despite the frame and despite the skill. So I like him. We conserved him. We kept him around 20 or something on our board because of the added uncertainty. Best player out of prep. And who out of prep gets drafted this year? Alex Jacobs. That's for you, Mitch.
Who out of prep gets drafted this year?
Plenty. And the best player out of prep in general.
Sorry, I don't understand. Out of prep hockey?
Prep hockey, prep school, I guess.
Okay, yeah, so Dean Letourneau.
Oh, yeah.
It's an easy one.
Kind of forgot about him, but it's the obvious choice. Yeah.
Yeah, it has to be Dean Letourneau. 6'7", hands, gets to the middle, vision, shooting skill, lots of diversity in his game. Daniel G wrote an amazing article, an absolutely amazing article on EP Rinkside about him. I've read it 3 times already. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, and it's open.
I'm using it as inspiration to get through the stuff that I'm writing currently. It's that good. But
you can tell I'm tired because it's the next tab on my on my monitor. Daniel's article. I wanted to read it tonight, so I just spaz out for a second. Yeah, go ahead.
I wouldn't be surprised if Aiden Park goes in the mid to late rounds. An energetic checking line forward, someone who can spin off checks, get to the middle, create a little bit of offense. William Zellers should probably go in the mid rounds. He's a very high pace forward who loves to come down the wing and shoot. Question is, can he do other things? If we're including like Minnesota high school hockey into that, you have to look at Javon Moore and Hagen Burrows, 2 line mates, both very interesting and exciting in their own ways. Javon Moore is a 6'4.5", maybe winger with speed, physicality, lots of vision. He's a really, really skilled playmaker. And then Hagen Burrows plays a little bit of a lower pace game, but he's a very intelligent give and go player who can pass through opponents, relocate, tap pucks in, and so on. So it's a pretty interesting class this year for sure. But Daniel G is the guy who would have more information on that front.
Yeah, I should really read his article because I have not checked it out yet, but it's going to be really in-depth with tons of videos and a lot of breakdowns, and he really, really goes into details of the game. It's super interesting every time. Deng Schnitzel, again, wants to know what RHD, outside of the top of the draft, do you think could most enable Kevin Korchinski to play his game? So probably someone safer who can act as an insulator for him. We talked about a few of them already, and there's a bunch of them.
Yeah, Charlie Alec.
Yeah, that's the one that came to mind, but there are others who could play that kind of role for him. Is Bedinka RHD? I think he is. I'm pretty sure he is. Yeah, so Bedinka is projected as a shutdown defenseman with puck moving ability, so he could help Korchinski lock down the defensive zone and also move pucks out quickly, because the less time you spend in the defensive zone, the higher your possession results, and the more you have the puck and the more you can create offensively. And he showed late in the year, Bedinka, that he can really play kind of facilitator role in the offensive zone and make the short passes to keep the offense flowing and jump to spots. So he has those offensive skills to an extent, not as much as Korchinski, but enough to complement him, and he can insulate him, I think. And there are probably others too.
It depends on how deep in the draft you want to go, really. Like I think Danford, someone like Nate Misk. Yeah, if you go deep, like Nate Miskey, Colton Roberts are all kind of options as well. Just like guys who can defend, but also facilitate and play off Korchinski at the point.
I have trouble knowing the handedness of player. I know some people are really good at it. I have to check, like, not every time, but almost every time. How do you two personally feel about Surin? I know the guide was not high on him going unranked. Yeah, he has the tools. I don't think he performed well enough to be ranked on our list this season. Like, I see some people are really, really high on him. I don't see anything more than the size and decent enough mobility. He's really mistake prone. His defensive game is a strength in some circumstances. I think when the play slows down and he's able to really mark his man and defend in front of the net, he's better. But in general, when the pace goes up, I think his hockey sense, it gets him in trouble. He reminds me of Thomas Lavoie, who's another QMJHL defenseman who has a similar type of weaknesses and strengths. I think he's going to get drafted, but I would not target him that high, like not in the second round, maybe after that, because there's risk in his projection, I think, more than the tools would suggest. In Ron Francis' position for the Kraken, which D would be a good fit? Where do they draft? Do you have this at a
Drafted 8. They
8?
drafted 8th.
They're going
I
to
mean, all of them really in their own way, right?
yeah, and all of them are good
Yeah.
fits, I think.
What you really want, right, with Seattle is you want someone who's completely dynamic, take over the game level offensive ability. You want that star piece. And the answer to that, it could be any of them. The
Yeah,
most probable bet for that player is probably Parekh, and then Buium, Levshunov, but Levshunov won't be there. But yeah, what I really want to see them do is add that star level player who can really control the game. Maybe that's Yakemchuk. I don't know, but yeah, it's just all for me who get the most dynamic guy.
yeah. Do you want the all-around good, the in every area player? That's Dickinson. The I think Parekh might be available. Like, it's hard to go wrong, but like Mitch said, I would go for maximum control of the game, quarterback potential for them. Who is the WHL's most divisive player in terms of scouts evaluations? It's got to be Marcus, right? It's one of
Oh yeah.
them. Yeah, it's one of them. I like him way more than Mitch, but also I fully understand the weaknesses in this projection. Is there anyone else too?
It's probably Harrison Brunick could be that guy, but I think the difference, right, is with Brunick, it's a guy who could go from 25 to 50 as an activating right shot defenseman who can create offense, join the play, and defend. Whereas with Marcus, it's a guy who could go probably, I think most people
Late.
have him ranked early second public, right? But he's probably going to go in the mid rounds. So it's probably him.
Yeah, he's someone who plays a really junior type of game. He waits for the play to come to him at times, but then he has those performances where you're like, wow, this guy's a top 15 pick. Like, he takes over a game with his motor. He can make plays a bit like Andrew Crystal in his draft year at times off the rush by slowing down the tempo and manipulating gaps and all of this. So he has those high moments, but mostly it's you watch him and nothing happens until he has one or two flashes, and the skating is more an average projection. So yeah, he projects more as the negative projection. If you're not optimistic, you think he's more of a top junior scorer than an NHLer.
Well, I think I really like the upside because I
Me
mean
too.
there are games where he can completely control the game, and then you add in the fact that he's a missile on the forecheck and he's hitting everything, he's getting everyone's way, he's just generally creating chaos, but it's not there most nights. And for him, it's going to come down to finding that level of consistency, and then on top of that, developing more translatable patterns to get to the NHL. Where we have him ranked, I think, is perfectly reasonable, given that when you're a public service, I guess, part of the benefit, right, is that you can rank guys knowing full well that they're going to go lower because they have that boom potential. Um, he's going to be a very interesting one to see what happens because I think where we have him ranked, in the 38 range, there's a chance that he doesn't make the NHL, so then having him 38 is too high. But there's also a chance that he becomes one of the 15 best forwards in the draft class.
What are the biggest differences between Iginla and Vanacker and Luca Marelli and Korchinski? I don't see any similarities between the last two. Luca Marelli is like an all-around, shutdown, effective junior defenseman. Do I have the right one? Just to make
Are
sure.
you thinking of
Luca
Frankie or
Marelli.
Luca?
Yeah, he's the one who plays in Oshawa.
Yeah,
Okay, because there's two in the OHL this year. So
related cousins.
Oh, I didn't know that. So he's more of this all-around shutdown defenseman who has a good motor and can participate offensively, but not really create as much. So there's no similarities with Korchinski, who is a high-event defenseman who really wants to take over games and dangle defenders at the line and get off the line, activate into space, and carry the puck up. So one is more of a safer projection if he makes the NHL, and the other one projects as a power play one quarterback, Korchinski that is. And between Iginla and Vanacker, that's more for you, Mitch.
Yeah, so Tej's physical game is just on another level. All the stuff that David talked about earlier, how he wins body positioning, how he goes out of his way to make that little bit of extra contact to then win possession, his ability to make plays with his feet moving inside contact. Vanacker doesn't have that type of stuff quite yet. And on top of that, there is a skill gap there. Maybe the hockey sense gap isn't significant, but in terms of skill, physicality, tools available to them, Teach has a significant lead on him.
Buttery Spread wants to know, quick, would you rather have Michkov or Demidov, Benson or Catton, Buium or Luke Hughes? Oh, I'd take Michkov simply because of the track record. I like Demidov more personally, but if I was in a position to draft either of those players, and I'd have to go with Demidov, who only played in the MHL, and Michkov, who showed more, even his draft year against KHL players, I would take Michkov, but my heart leans Demidov because he's more exciting, more skill there. I had a good debate on this with Lassie Allen on EP Ring side. If you want to check it out, we really talked about all the aspects of that debate, Michkov versus Demidov. Benson or Catton? Benson, I think. Mitch, what do you think?
Yeah, no debate in my mind. Benson not as dynamic off the rush, but he's better at everything else, and the rush game is also quite good.
Buium or Luke Hughes?
Buium.
Yeah, me too. It's simply a matter of the all-around game is better, and I think in terms of even offensive hockey sense, Buium might have the edge there because Hughes relies a lot on his skating. It's elite, but Buium has the more advanced reads, I think, overall. And he's going to work better in the system, better manage the puck, and he's going to get more chances to show his skills because of the overall better defense, I think. So he might not score as many points at Hughes, but the possession metrics are going to be in his favor almost surely. I'm a fan of Zetterberg. What do you think his ceiling is? You would think he'll benefit from playing NCAA instead of the SHL. He's highly dynamic, super creative. Handling skills are pretty good. He's all around fun player. It's just that in a pretty small package, unfortunately. So that's the only real issue with him. But he's not just like small for the NHL. He's even small for most leagues. So we'll see where he ends up. I think he's going to get drafted because teams do tend to value skill when we get into very late rounds and they want to take on a project like him. But yes, he's going to benefit from playing NCAA on some smaller surfaces against in a system that resembles the NHL more than the SHL. I think it's a good patch for him, and he might not have played a lot in the SHL. He's going to get more minutes in the NCAA, and his skill is going to shine if he gets those minutes. The question was probably okay. We already answered that. Which players do you think have the highest work rate in the draft? It comes back to Cole Baudouin. I think we gave him 3 of the same badges, has that dog in him, and he really has it. Mitch, if you still have your dog, it's your chance to show her. But everything.
Okay, I'll go get her.
We just want to plug the dog for a second. He's everything you want in a playoff performer. Like, he works super hard on the boards, he rushes the net, but it's really the checking game, and it's about the off-ice work ethic too. Everything we've heard about him, it just makes him even better in our eyes because he's a player who's not going to be outworked in every facet of the competitive game. He's just going to get better and better. He's working with a skating coach. It's his main weakness right now, and he's already trying to figure that out and add speed to his game. So if he develops just a bit more speed, he's going to be that bottom 6 player that the Tampa Bay Lightning play a premium come the trade deadline to here's the dog to acquire, because he just makes lines work, he makes teams work, because he's going to hit the opposing defenseman on breakouts, and he's going to steal the puck from them, and he has enough playmaking to make plays on the inside. So enough skill, all of the abilities that you want in a checker, and he's working on his weaknesses. So both on ice work ethic and off ice too. Is Alec just Dickinson light for teams in the 25-35 range? They're not exactly the same type of player, but it's not too bad of a comparison. Maybe Mitch can talk more about this. Is Alec just Dickinson light?
Yeah, there are some similarities there. I think you have a guy who's big, can skate, likes to activate into the play. It's just the frequency with them is different. Dickinson wants to be involved a little bit more. The skill level's a little bit higher. He has a standout offensive element that Alec doesn't, which is the shot. Um, so yeah, there are definitely some similarities there. I don't think, like, I think that's a pretty fair statement.
Brett Winters. Is Seneca strong at strategically moving in the offensive zone, or is he using his great hands in a more reactionary way? Can he cultivate stronger strategy if not strong there? That's a really good question. I
It's a
think
great question.
you want to answer it? It's your article.
Sure. Yeah, but you made the video. Anyway, we're just plugging each other's content now. Well, stuff. Yeah, so with Seneca, it's a mixture of both. It's that he can dictate and be the guy in control and then make the easy play around them or through them. Like when you look at danglers in the NHL, it's a lot of manipulating feet first. It's not so much about having the hand speed. It's more putting the puck into an area, waiting for the D to pivot or skate into you, and then you quickly go behind them or through them or whatever. Seneca does do that. He can do that with the hip pocket fakes, the backhand skill in particular, with where he kind of holds the puck and then exposes it real quickly and then goes backhand through them. So he can do that, but because he's trying such an insane frequency of one-on-one plays, there are a lot of them where he's just skating in straight lines, trying to dangle people with no foresight. He's the type of player who at the end of his shift, he'll just like try some random spinorama into traffic and lose the puck. So the frequency will have to change, but we're confident that it will because of past history showing that players who create a ton of advantages will improve their decision making in the process.
Yeah. Basically, if you have a higher amount of hockey sense, if you're experimenting, we don't really care. We just see it as a positive. Like if he's just making reactionary moves and moves that don't work right now, he's just trying to test his limits. And when he gets to a higher level, that's just going to help him because he's going to know his skills better. He's going to have pushed his skills, and because he has that higher level of hockey sense, he's going to be able to adapt his game. So even if it's sometimes reactionary and he plays in junior ways, I think he's more than smart enough to just abandon what doesn't work and figure out what works and still be a player who wants to create advantages. And that's what matters, honestly. Who would be the player the Habs should target if they would package the 26th overall pick and another of their asset and move up? Move up for someone. Like, is there someone that could fall that's really high value? Stian Solberg is a left shot D, but he's a really, really interesting project. Like, I would move up for him. They already drafted David Reinbacher, and it's, again, a bit of the same ingredients. We compared him to Moritz Seider before that, and it's the same formula. They come from lesser-known leagues. They played against professionals. They have professional habits, and they have a desire to influence the game and good enough tools. I think because they haven't developed in the best systems in terms of tactical understanding and all this, they have more runway offensively, and Solberg just wants to influence the game. Like, he has that desire to make plays that's burning, and we saw that at the World Championship. He was not intimidated by anyone at all. Like, he was just defending Bedard, defending Parekh, and he didn't care. Tried to head them off the puck and all this, and tried to then go through them and make plays. Same thing with Seneca. If you have that desire to make plays, in general, it projects very well. So I would move up for him. But I don't think they need to move up that much, honestly, because our first tier ends at like 15, 16. I think Liam Greentree might be available, honestly, even at 26. So they might get him. But if the list is getting to like 22 and 23 and he's still available, he's a player with top line upside. I would move up for him. Like, I would package second rounder, 2 second rounders, even then if they're late, to just get this player and work with him because he has everything you want except the skating. Will Stiga, Illich, and Frey make it to the second round? Stiga, I'd say more chance than not. Illich, probably not. I think he's going to end up in that 25-32 range. And Frey, I think yes. I think Frey is going to be available in the 40s. From our conversations with NHL scouts, there is not a favorite. How much do you consider player pick safety when organizing your rankings? Oh, that's a deep question. You want to take it?
Yeah. How much time do we have?
Yeah.
It depends on the type of safety, right? If the safety is fourth line center, then probably not so much. If the safety is number five defenseman, someone who's going to command high asset value at trade deadline, someone who's bigger, more physical, someone who's fast, gets to the net, so on, then that safety is going to be weighed higher. Generally, we prefer upside. I think the ranking makes that pretty clear given how high we have, say, TJ Ginla, or how high we have, if you want to go further down the list, Ryder Ritchie, Teddy Stiga, Harrison Brunick. But it's an interesting, this is something that we debate all the time, honestly, because it's trying, when you're in the public, you can't just filter out players like you would in the NHL. In the NHL, teams are like, this guy, everyone under 5'10", not drafting them. Everyone who's not an above average skater, not drafting them. And so in the public, you can't really do that because you're trying to show the story of the draft in the best way possible. So you're trying to mix in some of your own personal flavor, of course, but you're also more or less trying to show, okay, if we had to consider all these players and all these different archetypes, who would we pick based on upside? And then if it gets into a debate, then you go, okay, who would we pick based on certainty? And so on. So I think it's probably more of a secondary factor, but it's a significant one because so many prospects, especially with all these leagues getting better, the skill development, quality of hockey in general improving, there's so many similarly tiered, so many similar level of players that upside and certainty is almost becoming more of the factor that we evaluate than we did in previous seasons.
Yeah, especially if the players are really close together. A good example is Iginla versus Cole Yzerman, or Becca Seneca versus Yzerman. I think there's just more certainty for Seneca and Iginla than Yzerman, who you all know his weaknesses at this point. Like, I think in a ideal world, maybe Yzerman figures it out and becomes this 50-goal scorer, but just the fact that there's such a risk with his projection and we don't know exactly how he's going to achieve that, we tend to push the other players ahead, Iginla, Seneca, and all the others prospect, but we would not be doing this if they were not part of about the same tire. And it's really a deep conversation because there's so much more stuff that goes into this, but we'll keep it short.
I think check out the draft guide because in the ranking explanation, there's actually some very clear discussion on safety that David wrote, but also you can kind of see examples of it in how David breaks down the making of the top 20.
Yeah, check that out. Who are your biggest potential steals from round 3 onward?
Okay, who do we have ranked in the second who's going to go in the third?
Marek, Poirier. It's a small chance of really a top 6 scorer, I think, and a power play 1 scorer too. I really like him. He reminds me of Alex DeBrincat because he's not exactly like the comparison I see for him most of the time is not Cole Hutson. Oh my God, Cole Caulfield. Hutson are getting in my mind. But he has that physicality and that meanness to him, and he's not afraid of making contact and really going on the board. So he has that going on for him, and he has the shot. It's one of the best in the draft, and he has playmaking flashes. It's just that that's all in a smaller frame, and there's more of a chance that he's physically developed, even if he's a young prospect in this draft, and that he won't grow that much. So there's more risk with his projection, so I think teams are going to let him fall in the third round. He's a good project to take on.
I think Terrence Smith is kind of the defenseman version of that, where the upside is so significant because of his deceptive qualities. I mean, he probably has the best highlight reel of any defenseman in the draft class. It's just a matter of being able to put it all together in an NHL way. He also did miss all of last season pretty much, so there's the injury factor. Maybe he has a little bit more runway than some of these other guys. If we want to go like super deep in the draft, I mentioned Nate Miskey already, but that would be a guy who I'd look closely at. Luke Helenius is a fascinating one because he has the big shot, but he's also a pretty deceptive playmaker. Once he gets a bigger role in Kitchener next season, he could really take off. We're looking at someone more safe for the third round. Maybe if AJ Spellisy gets there, he's big, he's super fast, very aggressive, played center at the end of the season and really thrived. So yeah, there are a lot of options. And I think the draft guide really speaks to, we ranked 134 players this year in a draft that everyone was calling weak and empty. And we still managed to get 134 guys, plus a bunch of C-level prospects who we didn't rank, who are all fascinating and interesting, like Luke Mistelbacher, who didn't make the ranking, but could certainly end up having a breakout season next season.
Orange Boy wants to know, Kiwi Haru was rated much higher back in the day. Has he fallen off, and where do you think he gets taken? I think he's going to get taken between like 50 and 64, somewhere late second. He lost like, I think, half an inch at the combine or something like this, so that's going to matter to NHL teams, unfortunately. He didn't play that much because of the injury. He wasn't that much of a factor at the World Championship under 18, so all of these things matter to NHL scouts. He's since fallen off, and there's quite a big chance that he doesn't play in the NHL. Like, his main thing is breaking the puck out. He's really elite at absorbing the forecheck, making plays, spinning off checks, spinning off the forecheck, and making plays to the inside. He has all those skate fakes, but he's not as talented as Parekh at the offensive line. So again, you have a smaller defenseman who is not special in terms of offensive ability right now. So there's more risk with his projection. What is he going to do at the NHL level? He could become that power play quarterback, but do you insert him in your lineup for that, considering he doesn't have the same kind of elite level manipulation playmaking ability? I don't know. And the skating, he's elusive on his inside edges. He has some cutback ability, but it's not super explosive either. So there are a lot of concerns about his game. I think he's a faller, honestly, and it's too bad. That's because maybe if he plays the whole season, we see more in his projection, a bit like Adam Jiricek, but we didn't get that chance. So now he's probably going to fall. I'm going to try and pick the most interesting questions to us because it's getting a bit late, but we'll stay still for a few minutes. When is your final draft ranking meeting coming out? We don't have a final draft ranking meeting video. We make our last board with shorter meetings and by talking with each other in our chat platform, and we make it over weeks instead of just in one moment, I would say. And we never really make it in one moment. The draft ranking videos are a bit for show. Like it's not our full process, and it's heavily edited still. But for the last meeting, for the last process to make the ranking, it's a bit more serious, and we do it over a week. So there's nothing to record, but we try to do these streams instead to make up for it. Why are we insert that? Upside of Andrew Basha, Mitch.
Yeah, so the interesting or the great part about Basha is that you have a potential second line center, and you also have the checking game to power him lower in the lineup. I think very dynamic off the rush, which is something that he added relatively recently. It's not just that he has the crossovers and the speed, but how he's taking pucks to the middle, how he's manipulating defenders, how he understands that when he drives wide, he's going to pull the D into him, which is then going to create a drop pass opportunity or a walk-in pass opportunity for a better look. So then you add in the off-puck game, the ability to get open between checks, the speed, so on and so forth. So I think there's a real chance that he hits and becomes a second-line player, and you also have the checking line game there. And so that's why he ended up being a top 20 guy for us.
Red Boy wants to know, what celebrity's true ceiling? Does he realistically cap out as more of a Sebastian Aho, or does he have the raw skill to potentially produce 95 plus points consistently?
I would project him as someone who could be a top 10 forward in the NHL. So someone who, very strong defensive player, great at breakouts and linking offense into defense. I tweeted a video of it today. And then in the offensive zone, it's a lot of dynamic rushing routes, a lot of getting open behind the defense, timing his movements, shooting off the pass, a lot of playmaking off the boards. So he has the dynamism, he has the 200-foot game, someone who could very easily be a center piece for a Stanley Cup contending team. And if he's not that, he's probably still going to be a capable first line center. So yeah. There's significant upside here, like Selke potential level Stanley Cup franchise altering player.
I'm going to pick two last questions. Thoughts on Artyom. He seems like he's going to go late first, if not second round, but his KHL production seems extremely high tire for his age. Not an amazing skater, but giant dude. Giant in terms of weight, maybe, or strength. The issue with Artyom is that he's a bit of a good at everything, not special at any way, I think, prospect for NHL teams. At Elite Prospects, we see him as having higher end abilities in terms of off-puck play, like being able to position relative to your teammates, support plays, enter pockets of space at the right time to get pucks. And I think he has flashes of really good playmaking ability too. So he's good at getting the puck and getting it back to teammates, and that off-puck ability allows him to score near the net and in the low slot too. So I think he has more special elements than he's given credit for. Dylan, our Russian scout, really likes him. He has him at the top 20. We came down a bit on him as the season went on when he didn't improve as much, but his play stagnated and his production too. So he was brought down a bit, but I think he's still a worthy first rounder because he could play on your third line and he's already strong. That means maybe he doesn't have as much physical development. I've heard that from NHL scouts, but at the same time, you already know that he has an NHL build to an extent, and he can play a somewhat of a physical game too. So there's upside, but not top 6 upside in this game. One last question. Someone wants to know, when we talk about players having a dog in them, what kind of dog, Mitch? Do you think?
What kind of dog? I mean, it depends on the player. Some players are more Chihuahua having.
That's a question for Lauren, honestly.
Yeah, there are some people who have Rottweilers in them, like big cuddly dog, but if you mess with it, it'll mess with you. There's some pit bulls in there too, probably. Yeah, it really depends on the player. Like, with Cole Baudin, who has all the dogs, he literally does have all the dogs. All the dog breeds are Cole Baudin has in him. He is that dog.
And last question, I think that's interesting. I'm curious about the reasons that prospects previously highly rated don't pan out. I'm sure reasons are variable, but I wonder if you could shed some light on this with some examples. There are plenty. We just name one. Aaron Kiviharju in this draft. There was Atu Radi.
Wow, writing his obituary.
I don't know if he's... Okay, that's not fair. You're right, because we haven't seen his development, but he fell a lot on draft rankings compared to his number 1 overall projection, like when he was 15 or 16. It's just that when players are younger, you tend to focus on the strengths. You see, you don't scout them as heavily, as closely as other players, and you see these amazing things they can do, and you assume that the weaknesses are going to improve or that they're going to become even better, the things they already do. When sometimes those strengths are the reason they're dominating right now, but they don't necessarily improve. And you see the weaknesses a lot more when you scout them in their draft year, and then they end up falling on draft list. Sometimes it's warranted. I'd say often it's warranted. I don't have any stats to back that up, but fallers, I don't think they end up succeeding that often, honestly. It's a really interesting question, and it's worthy of an article and research on this. But when you see those flaws in a player, sometimes it's just not over scouting. It's just that we overvalued them previously, and then they just ended up falling because they did not round out their game and their weaknesses were bigger than we anticipated. And sometimes the other thing is that when you have those great strengths at the junior level and they work, you don't end up developing other things because you don't necessarily need them as much. You just rely on them, especially if you're chasing like a record like Cole Eiserman and you really want to reach that plateau. You only focus on that and you feel like you're succeeding a lot. But in terms of the evaluation of NHL scouts, you're not as much because you're not pushing the areas of your game that you need to push because everything works for you through what you already know and what you're already doing. So sometimes your best strengths end up being the reasons you don't make the NHL and you don't progress because you only rely on those. And sometimes the players with a lot of weaknesses, they focus on improving their game and finding ways to work. They develop more of a growth mentality and it helps them continue pushing their game as they rise. So sometimes weaknesses are strengths, sometimes strengths are weaknesses in terms of development. We could talk about all of this for hours and hours and hours, but we're getting a bit tired now with 2 hours. We might try to do another stream. We're pretty busy. with reading articles and everything that's going on in our lives right now. So it might not happen. It might happen. If it does, we'll announce it next week. You can always check out our draft guide. We worked a lot on that over the past few weeks. I think it's our best one yet. There's 400 profiles. There's tracking data, all of our game reports if you want. And if you don't want to read 2,000 pages, there's a light version for that too. So there's something for everyone. We don't go too much into the details, but if you want to really dive into the details, we have the game reports, and we try to explain our ranking too. So you learn more about our structure and philosophy. So there's pretty much everything in there. Check that out. And we're running a special. I think it's in the discount, in the chat somewhere, and we can link it again so you can check that out. And at TP Ringside, we have a ton of articles on draft eligible prospects. You should check that out. And we're going to have our affiliated prospects ranking soon, so subscribe to our stuff if you honestly want to support us and like the videos, like the stream. It's also another way to allow us to continue doing this. So thank you for being here, and thank you for your question. It was really interesting, and I hope you enjoyed it.